Hello and good afternoon. Sorry for that very, very brief delay, but welcome to today's webinar, the H-1B CAP Prep Final Checklist for fiscal year 2021. We have a great presentation ahead of us, but before we get there, we have a few housekeeping items that we need to get to. Today's webinar is being recorded and everyone will receive a link to download the recording. You will also receive a slide deck as well as SHRM and HRCI continuing education credits. All of these materials will be sent out in an email tomorrow afternoon, so please check your inboxes for that. If you don't receive it, just let us know and we'll be sure to send it out your way. Additionally, if you have any questions, please ask them during the presentation today. You can do so using the GoToWebinar control chat box that you should see on your screen. And finally, I am dealing with a cough today, so if you hear me coughing, please excuse that. My colleague Erin is also in the room. If I'm coughing for a lot, she's going to step in real quick to chat with Sara, who is our main presenter today, and I will introduce Sara in just a brief moment. For those that are unfamiliar with Envoy, for nearly 20 years, Envoy has been on a mission to fix the inefficient, frustrating, and confusing immigration process. Envoy combines expert legal representation with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. Envoy secures work authorization in over 100 countries, has grown 33% year over year, and works with over 1,000 customers. We are particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience that we provide. And as I just mentioned a few seconds ago, today's main presenter is Sara Herbek, the managing partner at Global Immigration Associates. Sara provides strategic immigration advice regarding the movement of professionals throughout the world, and she oversees over 80 attorneys, paralegals, and support staff. Sara graduated with honors from Northwestern University and has a JD from the Chicago-Kent College of Law. Sara, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm lost track how many webinars this is that we've done.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Great. So I just want to provide a brief look at today's agenda. Again, this is kind of that final checklist. I know things have changed, so we'll go over some of that. And again, if there are any questions, and if we have time, then we will try to take some of those. And then finally, the content in this presentation is not intended as legal advice. Okay, so let's hop into things, starting with kind of this intro to H-1B CAP season, this essential information, starting with the eligibility and requirements for the H-1B. Sara, I know that H-1B, it comes with, you need a specialty occupation, right, and there's some other requirements, so can you kind of provide a brief overview of what some of these main requirements and eligibility requirements are?
Sure. Let me first start with the job. What it comes down to is the position that needs to be offered to the foreign national employee must be, as Eric said, a specialty occupation. But what does that mean? That means that the job itself requires at least a bachelor's degree or its equivalent in a specific and related fields. And then secondarily, when you look at the foreign national, they must have that at least a bachelor's degree or its equivalent in that field or related field to qualify. Obviously, this is oversimplifying it. Anybody who is working with H-1Bs understands that the level of scrutiny, as we will discuss in a little bit, has increased out of USCIS, and so this is certainly a very streamlined, here's what you need from an H-1B perspective. I think that the list of specialty occupations included on this slide is a good list, but that's not to say that even if you have a chemical engineer, that you're going to avoid a request for evidence under the current administration and what we're seeing from an adjudication standpoint. And so it's just really important to remember that the education requirements and really make sure that the individual, from a professional perspective, the individual you want to sponsor, it makes sense that you're sponsoring them for this position.
Right, right.
That's sort of the practical way to look at things.
Yeah. And you mentioned request for evidence, but we're going to get there in a couple of minutes. So obviously the H-1B is like one of the very most popular employment-based visas. Can you kind of break down, I guess, how many H-1Bs are available and
Sure.
what that breakdown is?
Sure. Each year, USCIS releases 85,000 H-1B visas to be utilized at beginning of the fiscal year. So that would be October 1st of this year, October 1st of 2020, which was the first start date of the U.S. government's 2021 fiscal year. 20,000 of those H-1Bs are set aside specifically for individuals who have received at least a U.S. master's degree or higher, and that has to be that has to be from a U.S. institution that is accredited. It's not just any master's degree or PhD, so that's also something to take into consideration. And while we're analyzing the CAP cases that we've received this year, that is certainly one of the factors that we take into consideration.
Mm-hmm. And that regarding you mentioned the 20,000 are reserved for the masters and 65,000 for everyone. There was a big change that went into effect the previous fiscal year, but it's still in effect, correct?
Right, it's still in effect as far as we know. We're getting specific guidance from USCIS as it rolls out the electronic registration program. While the selection process was a change, I think this year, as we will get to, is going to be an even bigger change. But ultimately what USCIS did was they used to select what's called the master's cap. So those individuals who have at least a U.S. master's degree or higher would be selected and given the 20,000 slots, and then they would go to the regular cap. They flipped it, whereby they selected the regular cap first, and any U.S. master's degree holder or higher was then put into the master's cap. They had said that this should increase the number of individuals with advanced degrees. We believe just on internal knowledge that we're tracked that is the case. However,
no hard numbers. They haven't released anything yet.
Not as of yet.
Not as of yet. Yeah.
Since we're 2 months into the new cap opening up, or I guess less than 2 months in, I think that we're probably not going to get those hard and fast numbers.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Well, speaking of that new process, that's going to lead us right into it. Electronic registration, which I'm sure it's on top of everyone's mind.
Certainly is on mine.
Yes. And just a little bit of background information. On December 6th of 2019, U.S. did finally announce that it will implement electronic registration for this forthcoming fiscal year 2021 H-1B cap season. And on this particular slide, we just have a couple other dates, kind of just timeline. Sarah, I'm well aware that it was introduced at the beginning of 2019, but not finalized until the end, which left a lot, I guess, the people in limbo. Well, from your end, I'm sure there's a lot of questions.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of questions, but I think that right now, everybody is doing what we can to prepare for the electronic registration system. We are waiting with bated breath for USCIS to publish all of these specific dates. We have certain guidelines that have yet to be confirmed by USCIS. In the upcoming this week and next, there are webinars that USCIS is producing. So I would expect that hopefully after that, we'll get a little more guidance. I believe, I think I was on another call, and it'd be a great Valentine's Day gift to get this information, I suppose, to a certain extent. So right now, we're working with tentative information. There are certain things that we would generally expect, and so we're doing the best we can to go based on that knowledge and continue moving forward to ensure that we're supporting our clients as best we can.
For sure. And speaking of those USCIS webinars, I have it pulled up right here. USCIS will have a webinar Thursday, February 6th, discussing the electronic registration and then the process in My USCIS for registrants. So, I guess everyone listening in probably would want to listen in.
That would not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
There is one specifically set aside for attorneys and agents. So that is certainly one that we'll be listening. Well, we'll be listening to both, but it's certainly not a terrible idea.
For sure.
Considering the circumstances that we're dealing with, in addition to the fact that we are now less than a month out.
Yeah.
And so getting as much information, concrete or otherwise, from USCIS at this point would be beneficial.
Exactly. So again, so for our attendees, Again, these official USCIS webinars can be found on their main website, and that's www.uscis.gov. They're right there on the homepage. So again, as Sarah just mentioned, you probably want to listen in on those. So just briefly kind of want to compare what the old process was versus this new process.
Right.
And we put together this timeline again, as you mentioned, it's very, very rough because there are no specific dates, but can you kind of just explain what our viewers, our attendees are seeing on the screen when we're looking at some of these old dates versus this new date?
Sure.
New dates.
So in every CAP year prior to this, the first date that H-1B CAP petitions can be filed was the first business day in April. That is 6 months in advance of October 1st, which is the first date that an H-1B CAP petition can start. And with the filing rules, that is just the earliest you could file an H-1B CAP petition. Generally speaking, over the last several years, the H-1B CAP would be maxed out within the first 5 business days. And so USCIS had implemented a lottery system. Last year, I think just over 200,000, the last couple of years, about 200,000 H-1B CAP petitions were filed during the lottery timeframe, the first 5 business days in April. And then after which USCIS would select a lottery. Those that were accepted were then issued receipt notices and processed. Those that were not accepted due to the fact that there was an oversubscription would be returned. So everything would have to be prepared in advance and sent in during the first 5 business days of April. Now, what we expect to have happen is that from March 1st to March 20th, USCIS will have an online registration system through its website, whereby employers or their attorneys can go through and register the company and then register each individual beneficiary that they ultimately want to sponsor. Those are then submitted electronically during that 20-day time frame, or I should say the anticipated 20-day time frame. And then ultimately, USCIS will notify the individuals who have been selected on or before March 31st. That is what we expect to have happen. Then ultimately, if selected, the employers or the attorneys that are hired by the employers will then have a specific time frame to submit the actual full petition. We expect that time frame to be between April 1st and June 30th, based on USCIS announcements. Again, we're waiting for confirmation of that, but that would be the expected timeframes for what we're dealing with. So everybody's going to know earlier, hopefully, whether or not they're selected. Then it's just compiling the petition if they've not done so already and getting it submitted to USCIS for adjudication.
Gotcha. So kind of, I guess, this with regards to the electronic registration, this is, we could say, the first item on this checklist that employers will need is filling out the electronic registration. What kind of info is needed on this?
Well, I would say it's much like the foreign national information that we'll take a look at. It's basically corporate biographic information. Okay, so well, it's not a human being behind this. There is ultimately a company contact. There is going to be specific identifiers that are going to be important. Company's name, doing business, if your company doing business as, FEIN, contact information for the company signatory, attorney information. Obviously, attorneys will be able to provide that for them. And then we do expect there to be a designation master's cap or bachelor's cap, and then also the foreign nationals information, so name, date of birth, country of birth. It's not going to be a lot. However, I think it is important to note that while the information itself is not a full comprehensive analysis of the position being offered and the individual's background, you still have the legal requirement of any individual that is submitted they need to be offered an H-1B position, and the individual has to meet those criteria according to your analysis. Now, obviously, USCIS will have the final decision-making authority on whether or not that meets the criteria, but that is a necessary analysis, even though it is so streamlined. It needs to take place.
Gotcha. And then just kind of wrapping things up with regards to the electronic registration, I think, again, and you've mentioned this a few times, I think it's important to remember, they still are going to release more information. Nothing
has been published as of yet, or I guess I should say as of this morning when I looked. definitely searching USCIS's website very, very frequently, coordinating with AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, looking for updates there as well, just to make sure that we are in the know as quickly as we can be.
Mm-hmm. And so then the next section, and this is really where we get into the part of the checklist items. And again, just to reiterate, this is if electronic registration is selected. Because then it's only if it's selected that you can submit a petition.
Correct. From the guidance that we've been given.
From the guidance, yep. So let's move forward under the assumption that
you're selected.
We are selected. What is the LCA labor condition application is one such item that needs to be submitted?
Certainly. The labor condition application is a document that is submitted to the Department of Labor that must be certified prior to submitting an H-1B petition to USCIS. Typically takes the Department of Labor about 7 to 10 days to issue a certified LCA. And what it ultimately does, the overarching high-level purpose is to protect wages in U.S. workers and also foreign workers. It's ensuring that a fair wage is paid, and it's also documenting where that individual employee is going to work and what they're being hired to do as classified by the Department of Labor.
Gotcha. And then some other, so in addition to the LCA, some more employers have to collect some other documents. Can you explain what some of these other documents are?
Certainly. So what it comes down to is just justifying the nature and need of the H-1B specialty occupation that you're offering to the foreign national. So providing additional context as to what your company does, earnings, information, how large your company is or how small. There's no size limitation from an H-1B perspective. This is just providing further context to USCIS so that you can demonstrate that this is a bona fide job offer, essentially, to the end of the day. Right.
So then also I guess there's some additional information that has to be provided. The USCIS needs to confirm that the employee's education and work experience meet the job requirements.
Yes.
So what are some documents that can help with this?
The easiest ones there are the employee's educational documents, so diplomas and transcripts. If there's an experience requirement, often a resume is utilized. A lot of the times when you're looking at H-1B positions, particularly for, say, PhDs and the like, you might not have a lot of work experience required, so it could just be the degree that's required for the position. And so just taking those things into consideration, and then also having the biographic information of the foreign national individual who the employer is sponsoring, making sure you have that information. So you've got the passport, I-94, any visa stamps, things like that, just to demonstrate ongoing status and identity.
Gotcha. Identity, can't forget about that.
Right.
So then moving along, another important item on the checklist are job descriptions, and this is something we've discussed in great detail previously. I guess the importance of job descriptions, why are they so important?
I feel like this was foreshadowing to our conversation about the increase in requests for evidence over the last several years, and so we can talk about that. Certainly, I think it's one of the most important items to remember is USCIS officers are not always well-versed in each industry and job that is presented to them. And so it is, particularly now with such heightened adjudication standards, making sure that employers and attorneys working together, ensuring that the job is appropriately described for its complex nature and that you have fleshed out those descriptions. And so the idea here is that you're providing USCIS with a comprehensive overview of the position, but being specific enough as to identify ultimately why a specific bachelor's degree is required, or at least a bachelor's degree is required, and providing further explanation. I definitely have reviewed and typed the word Java and C++ multiple times throughout my career. I don't know what those are. And so while an industry expert in IT would know exactly what I'm referring to, having that additional context is always helpful, particularly when the USCIS officer who is adjudicating this may not have any experience. Give them the information so they don't have to go look it up or come back and ask for more. Now, that's not to say that you could spend ample time putting together a job description that for all intents and purposes, appears to be flawless. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have further questions asked, but, set up with your best foot forward.
Yeah.
Do what you can. Take the extra 10, 15, 20 minutes now in an effort to avoid additional questions later.
Right. And that's it's going to lead us into just an example of a job description such as this one on the left, analyze business metrics. And to your point, this is not a very good job description.
Well, it certainly sounds good, and I'm sure it would be on a post on
LinkedIn.
Exactly, right? And I think within an industry, a statistician or anything along those lines, they would absolutely get that. But having additional context, showing the skills necessary for the job is a great way to add additional color to the position to further support the petition itself.
Right, and then so then just as an example would be turning analyze business metrics into write code to gather data points from internal systems using SQL or the Dub SQL processes. I think I'm using that correctly. To your point, I'm not totally sure about some acronyms and whatnot.
Right.
So again, this is just an example of an okay job description on the left and then making it a lot better on the right.
Sure thing. I mean, and you could even then flesh out what SQL processes are and retrogression analysis and cluster analysis. I mean, you can take this, you can probably take this to infinity, but I think it's the idea as to what makes the most sense from just describing the job and the skills that are required, and then ultimately ensuring that the individual that you've offered the job to meets those minimum requirements.
Yep. And that's going to lead us to our favorite topic, requests for evidence, which is tied into job descriptions.
Yep.
So RFPs we have a chart coming up, but just briefly, requests for evidence, what are they?
A request for evidence is issued by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services when a petition or application is filed and the USCIS adjudicating officer has determined that there's not enough information to make a decision. And so they are typically asking for more so that they can adjudicate and issue a decision for that particular petition or application. In the H-1B context, we have seen very specific types of requests for evidence come out, particularly post-cap that have come up.
Yeah, I think we have like a top 5 that we'll end it with.
We do.
So...
Here they are.
Here we are. Top four. Now this is part of a much larger list, but for clarity, for keeping things concise, we trimmed it down to top 4. And this is directly from USCIS. These are the top RFE reasons. Can you just run through the 1 and 2? Why these are? Why they're sending RFE for them?
One certainly makes sense, right? So the entire purpose behind an H-1B is whether or not the job itself is a specialty occupation. So it's going to the root of the initial job being offered to foreign nationals. And so it's digging a deeper dive. There are 4 factors that we can utilize to demonstrate that. And you have to prove one, but generally speaking, if you're able to prove all 4, more power to you. Certainly speak to your immigration counsel to determine the best approach. The second one is employer-employee relationship. This arises a lot of the time when there is a consulting company and they're placing employees at client sites. And so it's calling out whether or not the actual petitioning employer for the H-1B is in fact, or does in fact have an employer-employee relationship. So think control and things of that nature.
Yeah, gotcha. And so just for reference, we'll include a link in email tomorrow, but RFE rates, for instance, in fiscal year 2019 were just slightly over, slightly over 40%.
Yeah.
And can you just kind of briefly talk about the steady increase in RFEs, which you can kind of pinpoint to the beginning of 2017?
Yes, we can. I believe across the board from an immigration standpoint, there's just heightened scrutiny. And we expect to continue to receive that heightened scrutiny. So I don't expect the 40% number to go down. I would expect it to hold steady or get higher. And that is just the nature of the environment that we're living in right now. And so the pointers of taking extra time, being mindful of explanations, working with your immigration counsel are exceptionally important. Again, as I said earlier, you could have a chemical engineer job offer with a chemical engineering background, and you could potentially still have a request for evidence. Is it likely? Probably not. But again, just being prepared, preparing your HR managers, your managers, and your foreign nationals with that understanding, which I think everybody pretty much knows the score now, but not everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so ensuring that you have a well-educated both support population and employee population can be helpful during this time.
Definitely. Great. So just this final section to wrap up our checklist are just some next steps for our attendees. Let's just start with the top. I mean, electronic registration has really kind of moved the timeline up.
Everything is expedited.
Mm-hmm.
So in the last years, we would be able to be running through things mid to end of March, and what it means now is that's too late. And so it's really, really important to reach out to Immigration Counsel to ensure that you have a strategy in place for how you're going to approach the H-1B CAP electronic registration, what the next steps are and timelines to ensure that you have everything over and ready to go prior to March 1st.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely want to have that prior to as a part of it. Certainly, I'm sure that everybody will work with counsel if there's a last minute addition. However, there's a lot that's going to be going on. We still don't have access to the registration system. And so being super conservative about getting the information over and having it analyzed is critical.
Right. Question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So electronic registration, USCIS did say that they couldn't nix it
Yes.
if it doesn't work.
Correct. So USCIS has stated that they reserve the right, if something occurs to the electronic registration system, to pull it back at any point in time, once, even after it's commenced. And so there is that risk this year.
Mm-hmm. And I think, as you just mentioned, but communicate with your immigration counsel to
Yep.
really understand the details on
Absolutely.
on everything this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody needs to understand what the risks are in this specific context. It's also brand new. And so we're operating under a lot of assumptions. Attorneys don't like doing that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's where we stand
Yeah.
in this day and age. And so it's very important to have those critical conversations so that you can have a plan in place. So not only from a immigration program manager perspective, you are comfortable, but then your employees are comfortable as well.
Definitely. Awesome. That's going to lead us to our questions, which we're getting a lot of questions rolling in, some good ones. I just want, just as another reminder, we can only answer general questions. Can't really get into case-specific questions. So please, if we don't answer your question, please consult with your immigration counsel for further information. And then just briefly, if you're not already, please subscribe to the Envoy mailing list to receive the latest webinar invites as well as content updates. And finally, here are the SHRM and HRCI continuing education credits. As I mentioned at the start of the broadcast, these will be made available tomorrow, but if you'd like to take a few seconds to copy them down, please feel free to. Great. So, Sarah, we do have a couple minutes for questions.
Sure thing.
So, just kind of vetting a couple questions. So, apologies for any awkward silences as we look at them. Premium processing. Any idea on what the status of that is this year?
We hope it will be available again, and that will be announced. I can imagine that if they're going to have it be available, it'll be very similar to how it was available last year, which is for change of status petitions, and then they ultimately rolled it out for all petitions. So I do hope that it is available again. One of the ways that USCIS has stated that is an improvement of the electronic registration process is that because they're not going to receive every petition within the first 5 business days of April, they will be adjudicating the CAP petitions on a first-come, first-served basis. And so that gives you they're going to be able to give more of a timeline, because if you get yours in, say, April 1st, you're going to know you're going to be at the front of the line. But it's also with the understanding that all H-1B CAP petitions are going to be received within a specific time frame. So you also have to be mindful of the fact that regardless of it being spread out over potentially 3 months, it's still a very short time frame for 85,000 cases to be received by USCIS.
Right, it's a lot,
So,
yeah.
Contextually, sounds great, there's also context.
Yes. So just kind of a general question on electronic registration. Have you discussed with your colleagues, do you anticipate like more, I guess, with this new system, like more submissions?
I think that is that could absolutely happen.
Mm-hmm.
The fee to prepare it is nominal, it's $10. And so if you're an employer that utilizes the H-1B program to help support your ongoing business needs, why wouldn't you make that investment? It's certainly less expensive than trying to front USCIS filing fees.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that allows for an opening and an opportunity for companies that do utilize the H-1B program to expand that. Now, whether or not it was specifically contemplated in the registration process as the fundamental purpose was reducing business expenses and ease of registration, I think it's just a necessary, obvious offshoot of that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Gotcha. Is this time period the only time someone can apply, or we can apply for an H-1B? According
to what we're being told now, yes, it is. The registration occurs March 1st to March 20th, and then ultimately petitions will be accepted, or what we expect, from April 1st to June 30th. And you have to be a part of the electronic registration process as of now to actually submit an H-1B CAP petition.
Gotcha. And all this discussion around electronic registration, that's going to take place with the USCIS, USCIS, is that?
Yeah, myuscis.gov. And then also just go simply to uscis.gov website, and they have links on the homepage to have you get the information that you need.
Gotcha. Great. We got time for a couple more questions. Excuse me. So, sticking on the topic of electronic registration, just to again reiterate, you can only submit a full petition if
the individual is selected and during the time frame that USCIS has advised, based on what we know now.
Great, thank you. There's a couple. Again, everyone is sending some great questions, but these are some of these are very, very specific that we just cannot answer. Please consult with your immigration counsel. And I think that's we're gonna end things there. I guess Sarah, any closing remarks? There was a couple questions on about how USCIS can potentially withdraw electronic registration at the last minute. How can companies
I mean, I think that the important part is identify the individuals that you would like to sponsor, reach out to your immigration attorney to discuss not only who you would like to sponsor, but also what your options are, considering the circumstances that we find ourselves in, a brand new program that could potentially be pulled back. And so just educating yourself and understanding what your options are is the best path forward, and doing it quickly, since we are now less than a month out from when registration is supposed to kick off.
Yep. Great. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. To our attendees, thank you so much for joining us. Again, apologies for that slight delay at the start. We had a great presentation today. Again, the recording will be emailed out tomorrow afternoon, as well as the slide deck and continuing education credits. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.